We're back on the internet. Let's do some session prep in Jasper's lab, right? I'm Jasper. Hope everything is okay with you all. Hello, Bo Bickus. Yay. Hello, Ashley Gibson. Yay. Hello, GT Jet, Herstay Fest, Michel Kwok, and everybody else. I even saw our Dungeon Master here, so better be doing a good show this evening, because, well, you know, if I'm messing it up, I will certainly get kicked from our adventure. At least that's my guess. By now, everybody knows that I am Dungeon Master as well. Can you all hear me? Is the music too loud or too soft or whatever? I heard it dropped away last time, so please let me know. And the first thing I'm going to say after this, because otherwise I will forget it, if you have any questions about session preparations, ask them in chat. I'll try to answer them immediately unless they require some preparation. Hey, preparation, isn't this a preparation show? Yeah, but for other things. Then I will think of how I could incorporate your question into the next episode or the episode after that or anything. But please ask your questions in chat. Now, before we go into the other intro, the first thing I wanted to tell you is that we had a wonderful session yesterday again. The last Jasper's Laboratory I did, I was quite hyped about the session I had the previous day. Well, I'm again, because we had like a battle that lasted a couple of hours and was really intense with a big climax. So if you haven't seen that one, I would certainly recommend you go and watch it while it's still on Twitch or on YouTube later. And if you start there, then maybe it's a good idea to start at episode 1 as well, or at least episode 10 to get into the groove of where we are. Hello, Velixion. Wonderful, it was fracking amazing. Yes, it was fracking amazing. It was so cool. And I had so much adrenaline afterwards that I couldn't sleep for at least 2 hours. And well, you know, those kind of things that happen. But I've got something to live up to. That's, well, yeah, maybe not. Maybe I'm just doing my own thing. I was wondering today, why am I even doing this? Are people interested in this kind of show? And then I got reconfirmed that yes, this is fun to watch. Oh, Goblin Cavern, yes, we'll be doing a Goblin Cavern. And I'll do it quite extensively on this show. So today at Jasper's Laboratory, next Monday, parallel projections again with Michel, who will be finishing Transistor probably. And that's at 8:30 Central European Time, PM that is. And then the Tuesday, the 2nd of March, we'll be doing another Talking Void. The topic will be, what's the silliest build you've ever had? Roger will be my guest, but, well, maybe not more importantly, but very important at least, is that community champion Mike will be on with us to discuss this topic and to talk about GaryCon, of which he is part of the organization. I had a conversation with him yesterday, or no, the day before yesterday, Sunday, on Careful Cantrip's channel, together with Top Down Tabletop, yeah, I'm saying it right, and Mike and Careful Cantrip and me, and that was a blast as well. So go look over at their channel to see what happened there. And well, that's all I have to say about that. Please follow us on our Twitch and YouTube channels. That goes a big way towards helping us achieve our goals, which we have. And follow us on Discord as well. The community is getting more lively. Our Dungeon Master Roger decided today that he will be having a Dungeon Master corner where he'll be answering questions about his Dungeon Master style. So I think that's pretty cool. There's one game being run there by one of our what shall we call ourselves, right? I don't know yet. Our voiders, I don't know. You come up with that one. and it's getting more lively, and I like that. And it's a cool community. And if you really like what you see, just throw your Prime towards us. And if you even like us even more, then, well, you can imagine what I'm going to ask next. But if you don't like us, don't do anything. Void Cats. Now, but that's you, Michel. It has to come from somebody else. Sorry to say so. Well, chat is going like mad. The silliest build I can think of is a piece of bread that uses unseen servant mage hand to carry itself. That's cool. True polymorph chair plays like a normal adventurer until it runs into an anti-magic felt or dispel magic. Okay, I can imagine that one. Then poof. Okay, so cool. Why do you guys keep ignoring me on this? Michel, I love you. I love the train in front of your name as well. So, but let's get into the introduction, which is very short, and then we'll start the episode the right way, right? Or the right way. Is there a right way? I have no idea. Could be. Right? Or not? Anyway, here we go. There it was! All my maps in the show. I hope you loved it. Because... Why do you keep ignoring me on this? Says Michel, and Ashley says, because I'm shouting in my head, Void Cats, woo! There you go. Last time we discussed how to continue our adventure in Pleasantville. This is in some way still a continuation of that adventure, because we met some goblins along the way, and we discussed about how that could be a difficult encounter. But apparently there were goblins, and there was a problem with the beer in the next village. Let's see if I can get to that part. Chapter 2, the quest for the cask is what we called it. A cask of beer to pick up, Ever Virtue. It is a green tinged ale that is perfect hangover cure. And we were going to find that in the next village, which was called... See, here we go. I'm so well organized. It was called Ochre, right? So apparently something happened. I'm not really going into details about what might happen there, because we already did a social encounter. We did a setup for a combat encounter, and this time we are going to decide that why the beer isn't coming to Pleasantville is because, well, goblins are waylaying the transports and have taken a lot of these casks and are harassing the people in the village, and we are going to bring this goblin community to life and see what will happen there. And we're going to do this in incremental steps of complexity. We're going to start pretty easy by just deciding that there are goblins. They are intercepting these casks and bringing them to their lair. And so we're going to make that lair, and then we are going to see, but what's really happening here? And then we're going to add on it, because I think that once your world really starts to live, your characters will identify with what's happening. This immediately brings me to a very difficult point, on which I touched on the last episode as well, and that is that, in a way, all creatures that are in the Monster Manual become more human the more years pass, and I think that's a problem, and I will explain that while we are doing the cavern. But welcome everybody, so keep asking your questions if you have any. I'm trying to think of a way in which I we'll include these silly builds in the next Talking Void episode. I can watch them back later on and write them down, I think. But they will certainly be included. So, Bobbicus and Valexion. If you want to see what I did with your answers, then watch the next Talking Void show next Tuesday at the same time as this show. So, a Goblin Cavern. Let's switch scene. I've put this magnificent book here under the other camera. Volo's Guide to Monsters. It has a lot of information about certain races, which really adds to the experience that you get from the monster manual. You know, there's a goblin entry there, and it's enough to get you started with goblins. But this entry really adds to the whole experience of what you can do with a goblin community. Now, goblins are a bit strange because you have they are really part of the goblinoid tribe, which includes bugbears, hobgoblins, and goblins. Now, if you read through this part of the book, the first thing you see is goblinoids, the conquering host, and that's because, as described in this chapter, goblins are always the ones who are being suppressed either by human-like societies or other monsters or their higher-tiered goblinoids, and this is why they torture those below themselves. That's the basic thing they have. On the other side, family matters, so that's a thing, and they are vicious when they can control the situation. They attack in numbers and they do all kinds of stuff. Now, there's also a part here about bugbears, and I wanted to read this to you because I think that this is where the problem really starts. It says bugbears. Bugbears feature in the nightmare tales of many races, great hairy beasts that creep through the shadows as quiet as cats. If you walk alone in the woods, a bugbear will reach out of the bushes and strangle you. Maybe I should do it more into the microphone, I realize all of a sudden. If you stray too far from the house at night, bugbears will scoop you up to devour you in their den. If a bugbear cuts off your head, your soul stays trapped inside, and the bugbear uses your head to magically command all whom you once knew. Pretty vicious. I love it. I really like this. But then it goes on. Lurid tales such as these have flowered from the seeds of truth. Bugbears do rely on stealth and strength to attack, preferring to operate at night. They do take the heads of enemy leaders, but they are no more likely to eat people indiscriminately than humans are. Bugbears aren't likely to attack lone travelers or wandering children unless they clearly have something to gain by doing so. From the viewpoint of the rest of the world, their aggression and savagery are thankfully offset by their rarity and lethargy. So they're pretty lazy in a way. So why do I think this is a problem? Because you have the myth of these dangerous creatures, and you really want to implement that into your adventure. But then a paragraph later, you realize that they are just humans with maybe some lesser intelligence and other goals, and they aren't that stupid because they know that if they attack children, they probably get civilization in their back garden trying to destroy them. So they think twice before they do stupid stuff. That's what it's saying. They won't eat other intelligent humans or humanoids because, well, they are intelligent themselves, and they apparently have conformed to some moral prescription that tells you not to do these kinds of things. And well, they are big and hairy, but they seldom get out of their seats. well, sounds like a human to me, right? If you go on, the same can be said in a way about hobgoblins, who love the military ranks, which sets them a bit apart from other goblins, because, well, they do like war in a way, but hobgoblins make it into an art form. These are often the leaders of goblins, and they herd these armies towards a goal that they have been given by their gods or by their military leader or whatever. But humans do that as well. Humans wage war between nations, and I'm thinking of Matthew Colville, who does one of his YouTube videos about this, where he says the normal state of a civilization is war. Peace is rare. And I think that if you look at the world, this might be the case here as well. Although not everyone has to be at war at the same time, there's always war. And there's always a reason to start a war. Be it dictators or nations crossing your borders or whatever. So these hobgoblins in a way represent this aspect of human nature. Well, bugbears are the ones who are more the opportunists, and goblins represent the suppressed humans who lash out when they can. Yeah, what to do with these creatures when you're running a Dungeons and Dragons campaign? Because I haven't even mentioned orcs right now, especially orcs, I think, because I remember when I read Era Salvatore's books about the orc king, Oblong. Well, somebody in chat will probably remind me what his name is, which was this amazing orc who got strengthened by totems and everything, and you really realized that it was kind of the second edition to third edition crossover book that Era Salvatore did in his Drist saga, and I loved reading it, but it was complex at the same time, but because the Orc King in the end succeeded in claiming a piece of land, and from that point on there was there was peace, although not such a, well, it was how do you say, tenacious? No, not tenacious. Please help me, chat. It was an uneasy peace, so to say, but there was peace, and through the years this kingdom solidified, and trade was being brought towards the both nations, and they really started helping each other. I don't know what happened after that, by the way, but this is kind of the way these races that were primarily the enemy in, for example, Lord of the Rings, get humanized, and then you are starting to get a bit troubled when you are simply trying to slaughter them in their caves, so to say. So we have to decide what goblins are. Are they savages, or are they people who have these families that matters to them? Do they ambush in the night, or only because of really good reasons, like they don't have enough food to feed themselves or whatever? And if it comes to that, then they can just also be humans, or any other species that lives on the surface and is in a place where they are being repressed and their land being taken from them. Now, we can imagine a lot of real-world associations towards that point. So evil, in a way, among races isn't that evil anymore. It's complicated. It's just somebody on the other side of a wall yelling at you that they have rights as well, and you ignore them because they are monstrous in a way, and they worship these other gods that have other ideas of what society would look like. And of course this is a thing, because their gods are evil. And in a certain regard, in Dungeons and Dragons, that means that they are evil, really evil. They come from Acheron, I think. Goblins come from Acheron, or was that the orcs? No, goblins as well from Acheron, which is like the plane that's next to Bator, or the Nine Hells, so to say, where Avernus is a big part of the new 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons lore. And they reside there in these cubes that float in space, and sometimes they make these raids to the prime material plane and kill everyone there because they have large numbers there because they're all dead. And then this Magu Bijet, or if you think of the orc god Grumsh, or Yenoga, I think Yenogo of the Gnolls, who is not on that plane by the way, they come, they tell their followers to do stuff. But Grumsh, for example, who still is an evil god, gets respected by some orcs who form still gets respected by some orcs who form a society that has trade routes with human society. And in modern versions of Dungeons and Dragons, you can find orcs in normal civilization, and it's less frowned upon than it ever was. Half orcs especially. If you look at Critical Role, for example, you have this whole society in Zorhas, which has Jorhas or whatever, where all these races live together in a way that humans do as well, with the elves and the dwarves and gnomes and everything. There isn't a difference except for skin tones, way of transportation, what food they like, and all these things. Well, there is a little, but I'm polarizing a bit. But so where was I going with this? Yeah, we have to decide. And then there's goblins, of course, which is the race that's now getting incorporated in normal society, and that's great because it now is well, everybody is playing a goblin, I think, since Not the Brave was born. Although of course there were players before that playing goblins and everything, but this isn't really even a goblin. But now you get true goblins that are doing their thing. So I think that's a complicated thing. And then there's the other part, that's that when you are a teenager or when you are nearly 40, which I am, and you are playing Dungeons and Dragons, while you progress through your years of living, you start to wonder what to do with this. Chat says, I blame Terry Pratchett for making goblins socially acceptable now. Yeah, well, that's a harsh thing. Goblins and Terry Pratchett, that's so... Oh man. Anyway, and Terry Pratchett is my favorite writer, fantasy writer, let's put it that way. I love him. You all should read Terry Pratchett. Nearly every book. When I was a teenager, I didn't think of these things. Goblins were goblins, and my players liked seeing goblins and mowing them down with their weapons and slaughtering them by the dozens and going to have a nice meal afterwards. But then, as you start to follow the news and realize that some parts might resemble some real-life things, then you really have to start thinking of why these goblins are the way they are. And it says so in the book. It's because they feel a hole in society where they just get kicked at every turn. So then I thought, even far before Matthew Colville did it, there has to be a reason why this is the case. And the reason is scarcity. Then the species that are most different from those who can control their environment will be left out the first. And then you have these goblins who are in this corner where they don't belong, and they get kicked at every turn, and they start to retaliate in small ways, and they get a name for that, and then you have an easy way of killing goblins again. And then there's the other way, and that's where which you see in Lord of the Rings, where the numbers are so great and they have this hatred versus the other races of the world, which can of course be redirected through a dark heritage or something, but in the end they want to have land as well, and they want to have riches, and the other species have it, and they are going to take it from them, and they have a lot less rules about how to go on with this. And then you have the numbers. But the numbers, if your neighboring country made out of dwarves attacks your country made out of humans, you have the same war. Maybe you can talk a bit. The moral, the morals are a bit more aligned. But in the end, if you don't fight, they are going to conquer you, and you don't want that. So, yeah, that's a bit of the position where we find ourselves in these days when we are doing goblins. And so today I'm going to do this with you. Decide that goblins are stupid and can be hacked to pieces, up to a point where we can say goblins have a way of living as well, which has to be taken into account when you enter a goblin cave and start slaughtering them. And with those opposites, I'm also going to increase the complexity in which you can think of the map that you're using. Chat says, unseen academicals, I believe, for goblins become introduced into polite society. Yeah, but that's the thing that Terry Pratchett does, and that's make everything normal. You know, that's why it always starts with, no, we're not going to do that, and then the same sentence that makes you think of why you aren't going to do that makes you think of why you should be doing that. That's the strength of his books. So, without further ado, let's start drawing a cave. Now, I have some grid paper here, which is good for the camera, as you can see. Why I took some grid paper is to have some perspective on how large things are. I will leave grid paper alone very soonish, because I don't like to draw my maps on grid paper. I like to draw my battle maps on grid paper, but then I'm using inch squares instead of these squares. You see, now I took all of the pens out of their casket, and I have them all lying here, and I can't see which one I need to use. That's a 0.2, that's a 0.3, that's a 0.8, that's a 0.5. Let's do those. So, a goblin cave. Well, if you look in the books, the Dungeons and Dragons books, and you look at adventures and everything, you see caves being drawn as this. Am I using the right one now? No, not using the right one. He's still picking the wrong one. There is an entrance. Now let's make that a square is now 5 feet wide. Yeah, there's an entrance and there's an outside. So this is the outside, and then here you have the entrance. Then apparently stuff is happening here, which can be in the form of a few cooking fires that are being set up, possibly like a wall of spears at certain intervals where people can run into and then they get really hurt. There are paths that slowly have formed around these cooking fires, so you really know where the goblins always walk, and then it goes into a cavern. Now the cavern, do you recognize this picture that I'm drawing? Curious to know if you do, because I think that when I look at these maps, it always feels like it's doing something like that. Now, what I also always find very interesting is that when you get into a cave, there's a kind of program that's being followed as well, and that's there's a kind of main room, and then you have a couple of branches, and mostly something is happening here. Let's do it this way. And you have a room right here, and then you have a room right here, and something similar is happening on this side, but maybe there's another room here, and of course there's this other room here that's up against the outer wall, and in a way this makes up for any type of cave. I went through Rime of the Frost Maiden, and of course it's not all about these maps. This is a fine map. You shouldn't do the maps are great, because when you start describing them, you can fill in everything that your characters need to see. So, for example, if they come up to this cavern and they come from this side, you see the mountain retreats somewhat from the forest, and the open space is cleared. 3 cooking fires are burning, and a large number of goblins are cooking meat that smells really nice, or gross, or whatever. It is heavily fortified because, except for a few small passages in between these barrier-like areas, you can't easily get into the space where the goblins live. They have really protected themselves quite well. There's a large cavern entrance which has been decorated with a couple of drums, spears, and weapons that they got from their enemies, and which they can't use themselves. And there are kind of mandalas hanging from the ceiling, which indicates that this might even be some kind of religious place. So they might have a shaman in their midst, or something. So you can describe it as that. The map is kind of always the same with this outer area. You could use this map and say, well, there is a couple of barbarians living there. Or you could say it's an encampment of the 3rd Regiment of King Arnold's army. And they retreated quite fast into this cave and set up a barrier. So, and of course, the more detail you bring into the map, and the more distinctive things you add, for example, if you make all kinds of skull totems appear on your map, then it might not be of the 3rd Regiment of King Arnold. I don't know. Maybe they are bastards and they cut off their enemies' heads and put them on posts. But that's where you can, where these kinds of general maps start to diverge from what you, from a general sense of what a map is. But in a way, this is what it looks like, and sometimes this is barred. There isn't a way like that because you want to have the big boss in this area, and then you have to go either to the right or to the left to get there, and that makes kind of sense because the thing you most covered would be in the furthest cave that is the furthest away. So it is logical that what lies in this area is the most important thing that you can find within this cave. Now, what I truly like about the recent maps is that the maps don't forget to include toilets. In some sense, you have this cobalt lair that's described in this book, where you can really see all the shit pits, so to say. I don't know what they were called, but and they're kind of drop-offs where you can sit and apparently your shit slides down towards a hole and it disappears forever. I wouldn't want to be the person who has to clean that up. And maybe it's even cleaner than a normal toilet because it gets flushed away automatically every time. I don't know. Because in medieval, I'm always presuming kind of a medieval setting in these cases. Your normal toilet would be outside of your house. In the Dutch word is a secret. I can't come up with the English word of the sudden. And only the castles and stuff might have had indoor toilets, although latrine. Yeah, although they could drop their poop into the moat, or in what you call in the Netherlands a bear cellar, because bear or beer is an old Dutch word for poop, so to say. So it would be gathering there, and then these cellars you have to clean up every now and then, because otherwise they would get full and you would be sitting on shit, so to say. There's a lot of history there that you can use for your adventures. But the easiest thing that people can shit in is a hole in the ground. So that's in there somewhere. Now, and then it's logical how you would what you would do next, and that is that you would think of, well, maybe this is the sleeping room. Which means that this is kind of where the goblins are living. Then you have kind of maybe the boss sleep. Then this is the boss council. Then here you have the guards. And here you might have the military stuff, and this is the entrance, of course. So this is your basic dungeon. Can you read it? Well, I think you might be able to read it on. Let me see. Can you read it now? Okay. So. Does everybody recognize such a place? I think so. Yes. Okay. Well, let's just assume. So now you just have to fill in the creatures in a way, right? Because there are some goblins outside. There are goblin patrols, which will be doing their routes every hour, and you have an hour in between where you can try to sneak in, and then finally you will get to well, there might even be some dogs here. I always like dogs, protecting them, or if they are a bit more exotic, it might be kind of those kind of dragon dogs thingies, more reptile-like creatures that protect the entrance, and then you have to pass them, or you give them some meat or whatever, and then you can finally get into the dungeon. And then if you go the right way, you have to confront the military, which are the more heavily armored goblins, which will give you some difficulty because it's a hard way. But on the left, the moral thing starts happening sooner. Although the goblins that are there might be weaker. And finally you get to the boss, and you have a conversation with the boss. Give us our casks back, and then he will do that. I did forget kind of a storage area, but you can place that anywhere. So this is kind of the general map that I think is often used to do these kinds of things, and really any other map in a way can be derived from these kinds of chambers that help you organize your goblins. Now, what goblins are here? If you simply look into the monster manual, there are two goblins in there. You have the goblin and you've got the goblin boss. Well, that's convenient. And then when you so these goblins are like the military. They have a bow and they have a scimitar, I think. And then the boss has 2 attacks with the scimitar. and can redirect an attack that's towards them to a goblin that's near them, which lets you know that they have to they need to have great numbers to do this, so there will be a lot of goblins. Now they have stolen the cask, you destroy the goblins and you find the cask and you bring them back and mission is complete. Am I clear so far? Do you want to ask any questions about this? Because I'm now going to the somewhat more in-depth thingy. Yeah. All good. Okay, so that's good. So the next thing is where you start to think of what to do is when you start to think of why they are even there. These goblins are apparently living quite near to a village of humans, and they needed to get, and they stole the ale from that place. So apparently if they had been there for quite a long time, they could have done that on any other occasion. But apparently for some reason they are doing it now, and not last week and not the week before that. So either they weren't there that long, or something has disturbed their ecology or their habitat to make them change their behavior. So we can decide on what this is. And I think that I'm going for an influx of goblins in the area because they have been driven away from another place. So now you have a situation where there might already have been goblins, but suddenly their numbers are growing and they have to do something about it. And that's why they waylaid the party. They have sent off small groups of goblins to kill people, take their meager meals from them, their gold, and start harassing the area. Now this is interesting because now you can start to think of what's happening in the orc encampment. So let's go to the writing screen. Quest for the cask, but I wanted to have... No, not the timeline. Okay, I've lost my bearings in my own thing. The Goblin Cavern. So the situation we have now is that there's the old clan, and this old clan has been there for quite a while. They apparently have their means of getting to a food source without bothering the humanoids in the area, the other humanoids in the area. So we have kind of accidentally decided that societies are very human-centered for now, because it's easy to think that way, because you can easily replace some of these humans with other species and make for a more diverse community. So you have the old clan, and then a new clan came in. Now, this and apparently the old clan had a number of goblins in it that weren't too many to really have an impact on. Is it the ecological system? I think it's ecological system. No impact on the logical system. No, negative. Then the new clan came in, and then there is an impact now. So let's say that this old clan was quite small. It consisted of one boss, and then 24 goblins. I consider that small. 24. This is the old scenario. Then the new guys came in, and they are one boss, which is a hobgoblin, and he had one bugbear lieutenant, right, Ashley? And 10 other hobgoblins, and like 20 goblins, and this is the force that came in. Now you have a story to tell, because this hobgoblin comes into a place where there are lieutenants. So the boss was already there. These people came in. Oh, and I want to add one shaman, and this one takes his own, which is basically a warlock or a sorcerer or a cleric or whatever. And the hobgoblin wants to be the ruler, because he's superior to the normal goblins. So there will immediately be conflict, and I think that because of the nature of goblins, the boss of the original clan will have taken a back seat and says yes master a lot, and the new hobgoblin boss is taking command. There are 10 other hobgoblins, so he can reinforce his rule upon this cavern, and then you have to still know why they left. So I think these for this story, the hobgoblin boss has left the hobgoblin society because of a dishonorable fact. He still had some support from his peers, like that. I suddenly realized that the clicking of my keyboard must be pretty loud, so excuse me for that. This is the story. Do we need more? You know, I always like to do the bare minimum, but as you might have noticed, the bare minimum we did it before this, and then this is the new bare minimum to make it work for a bigger story, so to say. So the Goblin Cavern is now occupied with a lot more hobgoblins, and the last Goblin Cavern won't do, because we just drew this very quickly, and we didn't put any thought into how might that be a place where the bugbear is kind of his right hand, who is bullying a lot, and he enforces with he can let him off the leash to do the things that the more honorable hobgoblins would not do. So he's the brute in the story, I think, which is strange, because like bugbears are and brutish and stealthy at the same time. Kind of mixed feelings about that, but they can hold their clubs pretty and hit pretty hard, I think. And they are interesting species because of the fact that they have this reach reaction thing, which I think is pretty funny, which can come into play when it becomes more strategic. So now we have to think of the logistics, and in this case I'm going to make more of a logistics kind of map to show you how you can think of your cavern more in a way of drawing the rooms over the functions you want to have in your cavern. So the So what you see is that you have, for this cavern, you still have the entrance, of course. You have the entrance, and then you have a couple of functions in the cave. We can put a couple of them back. So you have like the boss quarters. You might have comfortable living because they have lived here for quite a while. So you have the living thing. You again have the latrine function. You have storage. You have the common area. And you have living might even be split up. You can also have like a place of worship. And that makes up this kind of community. Now we know that there's a boss, so he has at least one room. I think that even though this community has existed for quite a while and has become comfortable, you still have to take in the fact that the boss has to be harsh in Goblin society to keep everybody in check, because otherwise he might get his throne taken away from him, or his seat or whatever. So he has his own quarters. So you know that the boss, these quarters are his own, and they exist of at least his boss room himself, and then maybe his sleeping area. Because he has been here a long time, he might even have like a vault, or at least a place where he keeps his valuables. Then the thing he would certainly be doing is connecting with those who worship. So the shaman is in this place of worship, and the shaman has his own quarters as well. And then storage would probably be connected to both the common area and to the living area, with a fast route to the boss's area. Because the boss needs to have storage. Oh, I forgot military. Because the boss must have access to that pretty quickly, and so does the military. But for common goods, the living quarters and the common room has to have the contact as well. Military is again also connected to the boss. The latrine is somewhere in the middle because everybody has to reach it, but maybe there are two, so it's connected to this one, and the boss has his own latrine area, which the military can partake in as well. Then you have the entrance, which will be accessible by the military, the common room, and the common room also has a connection to the place of worship that we have. And of course the common room has a connection to the living area. So this is how my thinking goes when I do these kinds of things, realizing what the connection between the different parts of the caverns are, because this can become a network of corridors that will lead you to certain areas in a logical way. So if we translate this to a map that seems logical, we can start at the entrance again, and we see that we are now going to be a bit more detailed, because I like my detailed maps. Can you see this? Yes, you can. We have the entrance, and after the entrance we split off. and we get to 2 areas. One is the common area, where we try to understand how the goblins are living in this area. And the common area has, let me see, 1, 2, 3 exits. So press 1 here. Like this. And then the military is connected here. This is a room that I got a bit more effort into to make it a bit more straight, as they were cutting it out, and so it looks a bit more like this. Then from this point on, the military is connected to both the boss and the storage area. So, that's cool. It's going over this path that's around here. You see? And then, let's see, this is going to be connected to... Let's see, it's difficult, this thing, because now we have to really think of how things will be connected. So here there's a path that leads to the place of worship. And then here we have a path that leads to the shaman's rooms. Yes, 2 connected in a way, like that. And here we go to the boss's room, and the boss's room has an exit to his private quarters, and it has an exit to the common latrina with the military aspect. So this road is going that way. And it has a road towards the storage, which is here. It has a part of the storage. There are a couple of storage chambers, because we know that the commoners want to have access to that too. And here we have the main living spaces of the goblins. Yeah, well, you see, while you're working this, I don't think I need this anymore. But you could, because I'm doing it way too quick. I really have to think about this in a more constructed way. And then the living quarters have been made bigger across the years, because they live in a kind of luxury, and they have the time to make livable quarters, so to say. So this would be my version of a cavern that's a little bit better thought out, and it has an upstairs and a downstairs in a way, or at least this corridor is going over something. There's a bit more space to think about how you would address how these goblins are living, and then you even have so you're getting a few parts that you can really pick out here, where you could do detailed maps if you want. Like that, of what these areas would look like. But for me, this really starts to become a better story to tell your characters. So for now, for example, there are still like 2 paths to the boss's room, but they branch more than once, and they branch semi-logical, because it can be a lot more logical than this. And here, this accidental corridor is now an expansion that never came to fruition. For example, maybe it collapsed in here. So you can add that to the storyline, and you can tell them like they really made an effort to make a hole here, but the stone was too soft or too brittle in certain places, so they couldn't go on here. And the living space makes for an easier opportunity to pass by, because the goblins can be spread among all these quarters. That is to say, if the new clan that came in didn't start occupying part of the space and press everybody into different quarters. So now in the new situation, the hobgoblin boss has taken up control of this part. So we know the hobgoblin boss is here. They've probably the hobgoblins have taken up residence in the military part of the cavern, so this is far better protected than it was. The normal goblins have all been driven into these 3 quarters, including the warriors, and there's animosity because the first group came with the hobgoblins and feel better than the ones that were already here, and the old boss is by now also here because they don't want to kill him because they don't want to revolt. For example, they might have killed him, could be part of the story, but maybe the shaman is put a bit for that. And then you have two rival shamans here. And the bugbear is always near the hobgoblin boss. The living quarters are now, or the entrance hall is nearly empty. People don't like to stay there because the military is always near there. And oh, I forgot to latrine. Now I'm doing it. Because the goblins don't feel comfortable being there in their original setting. Or at least they can't be there in the original setting because they feel all this pressure about the balance of power that has shifted. And of course the hobgoblin boss sends away the military of the old goblins, or the soldiers or the watchers, however you want to call them, the guardians, the guards, sends them on missions with the strongest of the goblins to get more food, get more stuff, so that the old goblins that are still here cannot form an army to overthrow the new inhabitants of the cavern. And now you have a story to tell, because there is this unease in this Goblin Cavern, which is so great to use in an adventure, because as soon as the players will start finding out that there are 2 groups of goblins that are in there, maybe they find one of the goblins that attack them lives and tells this story and begs for mercy and is pretty well versed in the common tongue and explains the situation, and now they have to see how they can cope with that. Or they get into this there and they see a conflict arise between the hobgoblin and the goblin, and they could start asking around, or well, you know, they go in stealthy, do some diplomacy, do some intimidation, take a goblin apart. And this is not just something to rip through to get to the caskets anymore. It's a social encounter. It's an adventure. It's an adventure on its own. And this one map, instead of going through a couple of goblins, can now keep you up for like 2 sessions. Or maybe 3 even if you really want to do well. The old boss might have his legs broken, so he can't move anymore, because that's the way the hobgoblin boss wanted it. But when he gets help from the player characters, he might decide that he wants to have better trade relations with the village and reward them, because of course in his personal chambers there's a secret vault. We discussed that one. Reward them with something out of his vault. And he says that, well, you can go through these storage rooms, because there's this wall that can be pushed away, and then you can get to the entrance of the hobgoblin boss's lair via the military wing where they wouldn't expect it. And this for me is what Dungeons and Dragons is all about, making it a very interactive area where you can have your adventure. and a bit confusing because things are going under and over. The players are always getting confused about these things because they keep going left and getting back to the entrance. So where are these living quarters? Love how this map is turning out. Well, just wait, Michel. And this inspires me to play Dungeons and Dragons. Now, what we haven't done here is, this cavern, maybe this entrance and this cave, like the first area, was an original cave. Maybe a bear lived here. Maybe water seeped in and it's kind of hollow here. You know, it drops down a bit because water was in there for quite a long time, and so this goes down a bit. So the arrow goes up to signify that it drops down, and but the rest is probably all handmade by the goblins. They carved it out. And that's what I think is pretty funny. Funny. Yeah, it's funny, but it's cool in a way. I remember when I was starting to draw my own cavern system for a kobold there, and now, which wasn't that much different from this one, although mine was in pen and paper and squares and everything. Why am I telling you this? Okay, so I started here with kind of, maybe this started out as a natural cavern, and then they start building from the natural cavern to expand. So if you see this one, the kobold there, it's typically not what kobolds do. They keep on digging, keep collapsing rooms, and start adding stuff to it everywhere they go. And that's when you get these kinds of maps. They seem organic, but they are planned out, although in a chaotic pattern. And this is where deep pit toilets, they call it on this map. I love that one. And here are some deep pit toilets as well. And well, I love my toilets, so to say. They are here as well. And there are all these rooms in between, which have their own function, but can easily be cleared from their function, and the function can be placed in another room. So this is quite a chaotic system and not natural at all. But I think that when you start, when you are a goblin, you don't start hacking in a vertical wall and start building your cavern from that point on. You find a starting point in a natural cavern or in a natural environment, or a piece that's already been cut out by, for example, dwarves or something, and then you start iterating from that point on. Sip of water. I have to do the careful cantrip thing here, where people can do their what's it called? Channel points, and alert me to taking a sip of water, because I destroyed my voice almost immediately yesterday when I was doing Bowen. And now I have to be a bit careful. So that takes me into the next part of this adventure. We'll be keeping the situation the same. So we have these goblins that have 23,000 points to spend. Yeah, I mean, yeah. So we should be doing that. Michel, go do that. Just making fun of Michel, of course. He knows I'm not serious, I hope. Although somebody has too, right? So I prepared a bit in front. You have to see where it is. I think it's the previous. Yeah. So, yes, funny. Thank you. So this is the map that I've been preparing to see if we can put these functions that we just discussed. I'll keep the map. Where did I put the map? Oh. Where we keep these functions and put them in a more realistic map. So, and when I say realistic, it's my kind of realistic, because I'm not a geologist. I don't know thing about stone cutting like a dwarf does, but with a bit of logic and things I've read about caverns, then I came up with this map. 20,000 points to make Michel quack for a whole talking void. Not talking, just quacking. Oh man, you're making my day. So, here we go again. First, what do you think of this map? Do you like it already or not? Hope so. ... Michel is... I hope he's having fun. Okay. Okay, yeah, so a lot of voids. Are they rooms or water? No, they are walls in a way. I can do without the stupid jokes. Okay, sorry, Michel. Love you. God, that great show. Now, okay, so let me explain this map. So, a lot of caves exist through erosion, right? Be it gas, water, or some other type of erosion. So I've taken, I've made a map where the erosion is made by a stream that went through here. Now the stream started off. Well, it's easier to do it this way. It started off here and went here and ended here. This was the original bank of the stream. That's why this is the highest point in this cave, and it's streamed here. It went into this hole, and there is a hole here, and it dropped down. And in the end, stuff happened below there that made it so that the water levels rose. And then it finally the water needed to find a different way, and it went this way. Now after that it went this way. After that it went this way, or this way, this way, this way, and finally this way. And it has started a new branch here. Although, because it's now inhabited, that will probably never happen. So two things are happening. You have the slope. This is the highest point, and this is the lowest point, and then you have the way in which the stream made these systems went from up to down as well. So it goes like this. Well, I don't know if you can see that on the map. And this makes for a couple of things that happen, because once it started streaming here, this got elevated naturally, and it had to splash a bit around here, so these became natural rooms. So these heavy lined parts are all stone again, but I wanted to use them for something, so I'm just going to color this one in, and if I ever finish the map I will do it for all the ones. So now if this is a very open map, but it's a map that could be occupied by the same goblins, and they could have made a living out of it. Now, so we have the outer area again. There's a little bridge over the stream here, there's a little bridge here, there's a stone line over the stream here that functions as a bridge, and there isn't much here. There's a river running here, and you know that all the water that comes from here is fresh water, so they can use this for that purpose. Because this is still filled with water, but it comes up from below, so they could make their, so to say, shithole there, or they could make it outside or stuff. But you still have the entrance area that splits off in different parts, but you can now really explain that the stream is coming from the right and going outside, and that it's clear or not if they started to poop there or wash their clothing or anything. And then you know that this might be the military area. This might be the area where the common room is. The living quarters are here. And now it becomes a bit harder for the boss to have its own private quarters. So when you take this as your standard map, then you know that these surfaces are quite flat. They're at a slight angle, but they're quite flat because the river has formed it that way, although the edges might be a bit curvy. But what you do have is an advantage when you are considering these areas towards the areas that are a bit below them. So, for example, walls can be built here, and doors can be formed here that allow for you to close up a space for a certain function. And what I thought would be great is that if you have this space anyway, that at a certain point before this, there was this small dwarven community that started in this cave and maybe started to build a temple into this space. Formed a wall here, did it like that, and then there's a far more rigid area here. You come into a room, and you have this kind of a small rectangular space that's so different from the normal goblin architecture and lets you explore this in quite a different manner inside of your adventure. It adds a certain amount of mystique, especially if you can even, well, maybe there's a secret room here, for example, that the goblins haven't found, or that's the room where the goblin boss, the old goblin boss, keeps his stuff, and he has taken up residence in this area. Or maybe he does it together with the shaman, and the shaman has made a shrine in the place where normally Moradin was worshipped. And yeah, you really have a space within a space that's different. And maybe there's even a staircase down right here that leads to a sub-level of this part, and maybe this frontal area has always been closed. You can really do a lot with this, but probably if the goblins have been here for a long time, unless there's really strong magic, they have found their way in. So I think that the boss, this is the new boss area, and he this is the new boss area. Maybe they even made a hallway here, collapsed this corridor that I just drew, so who knows, right? And this has become the temple area within the goblin lair. And so now it's become a lot more dynamic, because now the cavern naturally flows, and I think that when you talk about a cavern such as this one, you can really tell first off, you can show this map as they start exploring it, and really give them the feeling that this is a living and breathing space. You could already do that with this one, because in the exploration and the story that we told, things were happening here already. But here there's this stream, and there's this dwarven part that's in the middle of it that's been now occupied by the goblins, but you can even tie that into a certain background of one of your players, for example. And for example, this stair might lead to is this still on the camera? Yeah, to an area that had an old shrine in it, and with a couple of extra spaces where the old clergy could live, and maybe his tomb is down here. He got buried in a secret place. behind this, and that's why it got abandoned, because it wasn't worth being here anymore. And there's this raised days, you know, and there's this sarcophagus on there, and so you can keep adding. The map looks like a giant river or some such. Well, now you go, Michel. No. Yeah, maybe, yeah. Well, they are organic in a way, so that's the cool thing about real maps. If you look at a map of a cavern system, it's pretty. Yeah, I know, Michel. I'm just kidding again. That you have a couple of things that happen. You have like these drain holes. You have these things that are over the centuries have been carved out by rivers. You have pieces that have collapsed and fallen together, or there's like the continental split or something, or a volcanic activity that made a new hallway. And you can play with all these parts and it becomes really organic. And at the same time, when a society starts entering these kinds of areas, they will make it their own. So, for example, I think that through time, and I'm now adding to it because that's easier to do, because I've already did it with pen. Some of these edges might have become sharp edges, and these goblins, liking the thing that the dwarves have done, have made it a bit more structured for themselves as well. And they have made into the walls, they have made. But since it's D&D, I could also be that the mountain range is a dead titan. I would never do that in a game. ... Smiley. Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. I understand what you're saying. Yeah, the mountain range is a dead titan, and it is his river, is what you're saying. Yeah, that would be pretty cool as well. The map starts forming for the goblins as well, and gates will have been put up, and you get this kind of different kind of goblin lair, because it's now consists of different cultures that have mixed, and you have something else to tell your characters. What's even more so, and that's what I really love about natural caverns instead of those that are cut out, although you can do it with every cavern in a way, is that I already said that here in this pool, that's where the water first dripped down, and something has been closed off below, so that didn't work anymore. Well, what has been closed off? How many caverns are below this thing where water still keeps dripping, and what societies can be found there? Is this an entrance to the Underdark? And the same goes for where the water is coming from. Well, maybe it's just water, and it keeps flooding through this narrow space where you can barely get through, let alone breathe. But if your characters are using magic that allows for this, then you can have a whole other cavern system behind this that either makes use of the dwarven knowledge we found here, or is an entrance to the Underdark, or to an upper part of the mountains that these caverns are in. So in this case, not only do you have a very cool map for your goblins to live in, occupied now by the hobgoblin leader, who is now living in this part, and because this is on another scale, you have to see this is bigger than the thing I made here. These areas are kind of huge, and kind of messed it up with the dimensions of the dwarven part, I think, but you can imagine how that goes. And all these areas are linked differently together. A small, for example, if this is the living space of the goblins, then they could have really made small corridors in here, and either added rooms or just kind of bunk beds in the walls, you know, almost like what do you call the lime caverns again? Catacombs. And crypts that they've built in here, but they might also be used for sleep, because they like tight, narrow spaces. so they could have added them here anyway. And because this is higher and this is lower, that also means that you can go underneath certain parts of it and make an entrance here that makes for a room that slips under here. And then you might have an entrance that comes down here and an extra staircase that leads to that room, which is a different way to get your boss out of there or in there, because this is of course a secret entrance. And then the maps become more dynamic as you take realism into account, and of course add the fantastic anyway. You always have to add the fantastic. So this is what I like to do with my maps. They are starting to tell their own story, and when I will already show you where we started. Look, we started with this, right? And this is great as well, because it's like every other dungeon map, and it's all you need. You can go left, you can go right, you can confront the military goblins or the other goblins, and you can come out of it. And if 1 sec, I'll be back. Here I am. So, to sort of prove a point, Rime of the Frost Maiden. Oh. Here. This is such a cave. Or cavern. You see it? That's the entrance, it has the rooms outside of it. There's an outer space that has been slightly elevated, and then it has the back room and a couple of rooms to the side, and that works. But what I can never find out about these maps themselves is, are they natural or are they cut out from the start? The Goblin Cavern says that it has been cut out, so you know that that's the case there. But I think normally you wouldn't start that way again. So we went from this to the middle point. I lost my map somewhere. And this is the map that I love, because it well, you saw me draw it on stream, because I thought of a little logistics, and that when that's about all the session prep I need if I'm doing an improv one-shot thing. And I know by now that this will not be a one-shot, this will be a free-shot at least, because there will be all kinds of mystery and shenanigans surrounding this. I haven't even talked about laying down some traps yet. And then finally we get to this map, and it's rich. Can I say that about myself, that it's a rich map that I drew? I hope I can. Because I think it is. Suddenly don't know if this is the truth. Anyway, all kinds of things are happening in this map. You certainly can when it is that good. Oh, thank you. This is a map that's telling a story. That's where I wanted to continue. But the story can get even more complicated. No, you can't. Thank you, Herr Stefas. Because we have now decided that it looks like a cartoon figure. The two pools of water are the ears, the other was the shoulders. Cuperus72, thank you for joining us. Cuperus72, thank you for joining us. As well, of course, it is also a cartoon character. It's your show, man. You do you. Thank you. And Herr Stefan still forbids me from being proud of myself, so that's the thing. Now we get to the complicated part, where I of course started this whole story by explaining how complicated the goblin thing can become, because I think that at least the goblins that lived here at the start of the adventure is that if they have lived there for such a long time, there will be children, right? And children, I think, are a very complicated part of your adventure. What to do with them? Are they there when the adventurers enter? Are they collateral? Can they be threatened? Can they? Have they already been slaughtered by the hobgoblin that has come in because he doesn't want any future stuff? And then we get into these kind of difficult parts where realism gets the better of me, and I stop thinking about this because I can watch a lot of horror movies because they are simply scary things happening to a certain amount of people that happen to be in the path of some kind of big evil. But where I draw the line, what I can't watch on television is series that are kind of serious, where kids are getting murdered, or the whole battle of the sexes gets very patriarchal, so to say. I really hate that stuff, and that's pretty. So, for realism's sake, or for, well, okay, this is going to sound so strange, but it's either better to have the children been dealt with and then sent away, or stuff, or have them put away by the goblins that were here already just before the enemy came, and they have been sequestered into a safe spot where these goblins are giving them food every now and then. Because in these times we do understand that there's a lot to say about the inequality of sexes and species and everything. Don't touch that with your Dungeons and Dragons adventure. That's all I'm going to say about that. Something's happening in chat. Cuperus says, it is what you can see in it. The way you tell it, you see the society coming to life. Well, thank you, Cuperus. There's this one episode of The Walking Dead that gave me the creeps. Not sure if you know it or not. I don't know. I've watched 3 episodes of The Walking Dead and then I got bored because I liked the undead. I didn't like the people. But it's the same. I think I mentioned this last Sunday even. It's when you watch Pan's Labyrinth with all these fantastic creatures in it. You aren't afraid of those creatures. Well, you might be for a second, but the really scary bit is between what I think is the father, or pretends to be the father, or married to the woman, I don't remember, and the girl. That and the mother as well. That relationship is so scary in that movie. The monsters are okay; they are a way to cope with it, but the real people are the scary bits. And this is a fantasy game, people, where you cooperate to build a beautiful tale. So that's where I draw the line. So make it a thing where the stakes are real, but not too real. That's what I'm trying to say. Option 3, don't think about the kids. Think about the society up until that point and switch to the here's the stupid cool cave with some goblins to fight. Yeah, so you can tone it down from there again. And that's what I tried to say at the start, because what you are doing is trying to think of what the narrative is here and what these kind of creatures mean. But in this case, when you start thinking about how they live, why they do the things they do, one part is suppressed by the other part, then there is a moral dilemma forming, and you can get into that part of it. And the easiest way that I mentioned about doing the adventure, and that is simply going in, killing the boss, and finding the barrels. That's a good idea, and you can also do that on this map. But then, find the balance of what you want to do as a dungeon master. Well, then it certainly is a one shot, because you will get to the end in no time. Chat says there's a single episode where kids are involved. One of the main characters has to make a choice to kill a kid because she's killing people, including her girlfriends, to feed them to her friend in the barn. It was an episode that gave me nightmares for days. Yeah, that kind of stuff. I actually rewatched it because it was a great episode because of the moral dilemma. Yeah, those are difficult things in any storytelling. Well, I think what I've done here is so you can look up the stats of a hobgoblin, decide if you want to have a hobgoblin leader, a hobgoblin cleric or something, and take the bugbear stats or give it a class level or anything, and make that into the enemies. You might have noticed that I don't do a lot of statistics. If you want me to show you how you can build the encounters that go along with this, I can do that as well. But I think that the thing I really want to explain is how dynamic you can make an adventure, and the monsters in the end are all stats. And a hobgoblin has his thing, a goblin has his thing. The one comes with a lot of monsters, the other, like the bugbear, you can really put up as a guard for the boss and make it so that he can protect the boss in a way that he can keep the characters in check because of his reach, and then the shaman can help the leader, and if by casting protective spells or healing spells. Don't forget the potency of healing spells in enemy ranks. Maybe there are a few lesser clerics as well in there. Maybe the boss isn't that hard, but his fighters are, or his left hand or right hand is stronger than him. And well, this is all the dynamic, because you can, for all the goblins, you can make them as different as you want. You can give the boss a name, and you can give his fellow leader a name, and they might both have really have the boss stats. So there's no big difference in that regard. But of course I will do one of these preparation sessions where I will go into details of making an encounter and everything. But I don't think that this is that episode. Something to drink. The Walking Dead had amazing moments, but stopped watching them when they introduced Negan. I was done with the whole meta aspect of the show, like showing who got killed off because of showrunners didn't know whose contracts would be ended. Ashley says, that was Michel. Ashley says, I do have one meta question, but one of my players is in chat. I have to leave, said Michel. Was this coincidence, or is something strange happening? Well, okay, you can ask your question a bit later then. So this is kind of the preparation I did for this evening. So ask away if you still have some questions, and otherwise we'll call it an evening at 1 3/4 hours. But let's see if Michel really leaves, and then I'm going to at least answer Ashley's question. And Kuperus, thank you for joining. And I got triggered by what you said. It is what you see in it, the way you tell it, you can see the society coming to life. Yeah, well, thank you for that remark, because well, I have been wanting to leave for half an hour, but just when I thought I was out, you pulled me back in. Thank you, Michel. See you soonish, at least in chat. I think that the best way to approach an adventure is make it come alive in your head. And if you get the story told, and it's like you're doing a Bob Ross painting, you know. Maybe there's a little goblin over here, like that, or maybe this stream goes somewhere, or maybe this pool of fetid water holds a monster, or maybe this one goblin is a really cool guy, or maybe they have animals walking around there, or maybe it's this, or maybe it's that. and you start to really feel that stuff in. And the other thing is that, and I sometimes have great trouble doing this, but you kind of can keep developing while the players are walking through this dungeon. I think that I could keep my parties in here for like 3 sessions. If I do the whole conflict storyline, make them have to hide because the odds are against them. Because remember, and it's what Ashley said last time, goblins can be very scary if you play them right. Especially when you have these height differences. They all have bows. They might have pets that do have pack tactics. They have traps laying around there. So that's let's go into that for a short while. Traps. You can have arrows shoot out of spaces. You can have beams come down from a ceiling. You can have spike traps. You can have pitfalls and everything. But remember that the goblins can know their way around these, and so they are either at a logical place for them or marked in some way, because they wouldn't put them across the whole space of an entrance, because then they can't come in themselves. What you can do is that there's a lever that releases some stuff when they are all in, and then the next one who steps on it falls through. Then it's a one-time trap, or maybe not even, because it does this and it flips back. But remember that the goblins live there, and so it has to be a breathable space where you can walk freely and let your children roam, so to say. That's all I have to say about traps. And for a first level map, because this can be a first level encounter, a DC, well, it's always a bit strange because you have passive perception. So passive perception for me doesn't work in combat, so that makes it a bit more positive, because if one of your clerics has the observant feat and is proficiency, it has a 20 passive perception on at level 1, and that really screws stuff up. But if you don't have them, a DC of 11 to 13 is high enough, maybe even lower, when you think of these kinds of adventures. So try to balance them out in some way. Don't make the pits too deep for first level characters, or do make them too deep but easily detectable, and if they fall, then they have another problem. But 5th edition lets you drop to 0 hit points, and then the mess really starts to go, starts to happen. That's about that part. Ashley says, okay, so how do you feel about some meta aspects for the dungeon? I'm toying with the idea of curses that will affect players not affiliated with the god of the temple dungeon they are exploring. Is that too much? No, I think you're running a Teros campaign. I think that's totally acceptable, Ashley. But in what way? You can give these kind of things might be distracting visions, for example. And if you fail a wisdom saving throw, you get distracted for a second and you have a disadvantage on your attacks, and they can only trigger, for example, when you become violent, or when you're not doing stuff, or you didn't wash your hands when you entered the temple proper, or didn't wash your hands when you entered the second room or something. You can do it in that way, and I like it. Do it. The curse is a bit of a strange thing in Dungeons and Dragons, because I always feel that, like for example, as Michel uses Hex a lot in the Precipice of Dreams, which is our main campaign, which will be on not next Monday but the Monday after that, but go watch the previous episode. Curses shouldn't do damage, or not immediately at least, but let them make you decay over a certain period of time, unless you find a holy symbol of something. That's what I think curses are, and if they are effects that are in a temple for a certain amount of time and they are just there, then that's totally okay. all based around taking a save, wisdom, etc. as you enter, and if you fail, then you risk the ire of the god. The 8 table then, some are funny, some are quite bad. Mine's 1 to hit for d4 days. Yeah. So that's the thing with 5th edition, because funny ones are fun. So that's cool, always cool. Oh, by the way, Herr Steffes, good night. Good Rick. Oh, good luck. You never know. Like these ongoing effects are pretty cool if you can learn as a character how to circumvent them, or can get rid of them by entering another temple or asking your god, or Teros do something with piety, or I don't know, piety. Is it piety? Piety? I have a seagull that follows someone around for d4 days demanding food, or it gets violent. Yeah, that's piety. Yeah, but I know how you write it, but I don't know how you pronounce it in English. Demanding food. Yeah, that's cool. Piety. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I love that curse. Having a seagull following you around, that's just awesome. Yeah, in that way, yeah. And what I think about it, it's that it's a good idea, actually. Truly. And I think that it wouldn't be appropriate here, except for maybe in the dwarven part, that they can't go to the subterranean level because it has been warded against followers of the goblin gods. Okay, I will keep writing the table. So many gods. Yeah, well, write them when they write them only. That's the main thing you have to take away from this series. Actually, only write them when you need them. Don't write them if you don't need them, because that's too much work. And the other thing is that once you have written them and you're 4 levels further into your campaign, you suddenly decide that this isn't the way I wanted it to go, and then you have to do them all again instead of just the one that you already did. So keep in mind to keep your work to a minimum, because it's far more cool to prepare well for a session with content that you truly need than to make content that you don't need at all. That being said, I do it as well, actually, because the other aspect of course is that it can be so fun to do. Fair point, it will just tick the ones I need right now. Yeah, means I can skill them later, indeed. Yeah. Yeah, so that's a Goblin Cavern, according to Jasper's laboratory. Yes, I can fairly say I'm pretty proud of this, and I hope you liked it as well. And if you have any input for the next Jasper's laboratory of what you want to see, then please put it on the Discord, on Instagram, although I sometimes miss things on Instagram, or put it below the YouTube video when it comes out at the end of this week. And give me something to work with for the next episode. I did. Thank you, Jasper. A wonderful evening as ever. Well, thank you. I think I feel like I'm getting into the groove of this and doing cool stuff that I like myself as well. So, yeah. With that being said, I think we have reached the end of the episode. Thanks all for watching. Still have no outro for this series, so I have to do the Talking Void outro again. It was a blast having you all in chat. A couple of people came in, went out again. Hopefully you enjoyed it as well. And if you have any input, please tell me. I will take it and make something of it. Next Monday there will be parallel projections again with Michel. The Tuesday after that we'll be Talking Void with Roger, and we'll be discussing the silliest build you've ever made. And Mike will be there from GaryCon. Mike, the community champion, who's a great guy who I did an interview with. Well, Careful Cantrip did an interview with me and him and Shanks from Top Down Tabletop last Sunday. So watch that on Careful Cantrip's channel. Yeah, I had a blast. I hope you had as well. And I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.